What's up? I just read American Pastoral by Philip Roth. I really liked it. It was the third or fourth book I've read by Philip Roth. This is his most famous book. It won the Pulitzer Prize in 1998. He tends to write all of his books from the Jewish American perspective, and he's famous for he became famous in the literary scene for Portnoy's Complaint, which really was this groundbreaking book that gave a lot of insight into the American Jewish perspective, I guess the modern American Jewish perspective, and it's famous for being super crass. And it's just a book where a guy is kind of recounting his life to his therapist. It's really funny. American Pastoral is one of the best books I've read in a while, for sure. It is, I would probably call it it really stacks up to that concept or idea of the great American novel, It's very political. It is set between the 1940s through the 1970s, and kind of diagnoses this guy Swede Levov's, or Seymour Levov's, Swede is a nickname, life from first the outside and then the inside. And I guess the takeaway is you never really know what anyone's life is actually like, no matter how it looks. And that's especially true in America, where we place such a big emphasis on, being tall and handsome, being good at work, being good at sports. It's like if you know someone who has all of those things, it's like you think you know them to their core, and you really don't. I think Philip Roth is a really great writer for young men. I had this thought when I was reading the book, because a lot of his characters are very morally transgressive, and he's very crass, and he's very funny, and there's kind of this edge of violence. And I just think, a lot of young men don't really read anymore, especially in America, and this book manages to be both very smart and very interesting, and I just find it being appealing for young men for whatever reason. I think if more books like this were written, maybe more young men would read, or perhaps if more young men read, more books like this would be written. It balances a lot. There's a really great plot. It is very interior. It has big kind of stream of consciousness asides, where in the middle of a scene he'll give you background for one of the characters in the scene who hasn't previously been introduced, by giving a series of things that have happened in the past with the main character and that character, if that makes sense. So it's kind of this meandering style that at times can seem a little dense. It can seem like it doesn't really know where it's going, and then he really I would say every 70 pages or so of the 400-page book, there's this big crescendo of everything he's been doing, all of these asides are relevant, and they just came to fruition in a really interesting way that you don't expect. At least that's my experience reading all of his books, honestly, but this one especially. It was written in 1998. I would think with the intention of showing that not a lot in the political landscape of America has changed from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way to the 90s. There are radical left characters who are communists and setting off bombs for terrorism to protest Vietnam, who call Lyndon B. Johnson a fascist and compare him to Hitler. They don't really touch, I guess, the conservative side of politics. The main character is a moderate liberal capitalist business owner. And I think a lot of the reason they're liberals is ingrained in their Jewish identity. But he comes into conflict with some characters in the radical left. It's very interesting. It was just interesting as a whole to see some behavior, the way people react to political discourse and the political discourse itself seems to have not changed that much, not only from the 40s, 50s, 60s to the 1990s, but also a lot of it seemed really relevant today, reading it in 2025, 27 years after it had been published. So that was interesting. What else? Oh, he talks about there's a really stark difference between generations in the book. There are kind of 3 generations of this family that are touched on and radically different and in conflict with each other. And, that's kind of like a universal thing, I think, and just generations not understanding each other. But he puts it through the American lens of one generation essentially building a business, the next generation running the business, and the third generation hating the second generation and first generation for being business owners. It's that interesting kind of irony that feels so real and maybe violent in real time in America. But if you zoom out and see that it sort of exists everywhere, you can almost look at it with this ironic detachment or something. What else? It's incredibly funny. I would find myself both literally laughing out loud to myself at certain points of the book, and then it also gets thriller pacing at certain points, where one night when I was reading it, I stayed up to 2 a.m. because I just read 200 pages of it in a row because I couldn't believe what was happening over the middle stretch of the book. Anyway, it was incredibly good. I highly recommend it. Yeah, I really loved it. Can't go wrong. American Pastoral by Phillip Roth.